The Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly has accused the government of betraying the British people by axing the winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners. He says Labour said nothing about this in the manifesto, so they've got no democratic right to do it. He claims pensioners will feel betrayed, and rightly so. Paula, what do you think?
So, do you know what? I have to say I was slightly bemused when I read James Cleverly's comments because as somebody who represents as a Conservative, we know that the Tory basic principle is benefits as a very last option. And here we have a Tory suggesting that we should have an unconditional benefit. We know that currently we cannot afford unconditional benefits. I don't think
unconditional meaning what, you get it even if you're rich?
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Universal.
What, so shut the NHS down for rich people and stuff like that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that what you want, is it?
Sorry.
You don't think people who are wealthier should use the NHS?
No, that's not where I'm going with this argument. Focusing purely on the winter fuel allowance. Right. We know that currently it's unrealistic and I would suggest from James Cleverly misleading because if the Tories were in power, they absolutely would be considering this as an option. And let's say that the Tories get back into power in 4 years' time, would they reintroduce this? And the answer is absolutely no with an exclamation mark. We also know that much of the financial markets out there and those who input into the financial market will all say, look, it needs to go, it has to go. What I'm concerned about is how then we manage the people who fall into that bracket of where they're just over the cusp. And that is always going to be
that's always going to be the issue. Mike, you don't think it should have gone at all?
I think it's the cruelest and most demonic government policy ever ordered or issued by an incoming government from either side of the political divide. I think it's disgusting that old people are literally not going to be able to turn their heating on this winter because they've had that £300 taken off them at such short notice. It's all very well saying, oh, well, some of them qualify if they've got this and that. Old people don't have screens at home to be able to go through all the qualifying stages. As Paul's already, or you've already pointed out, James Cleverly said it wasn't in their manifesto. Rachel Reeves suddenly stood up in the House of Commons and said all pensioners are losing their 300 quid. And guess why they're losing it? Because we're going to pay rail drivers, train drivers, £70,000 a year. We're going to pay doctors £56,000 a year. But that's where it's going.
No, sure.
Well,
that is the connection people have made, Paula, isn't it? That you settle the train drivers, which will even involve, I think, some train drivers who already retired.
They can earn. Some get the retirement payment from 2 years ago. Some will earn £100,000 with overtime. Yeah. And yet Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is taking £300 off a person who can't afford to heat themselves and giving it to train drivers who earn £80,000.
Mike says it's demonic.
Demonic. I mean, that's an interesting term when we know that 1 in 4 pensioners are millionaires.
I don't accept that.
Which is, I mean...
I'm sorry, I do not accept that.
That's a fact.
That is a fact. It's property. You'll be a millionaire. Of course. You've got a penthouse.
Well, yes, I don't know many pensioner millionaires apart from myself, I have to admit. But what I'm saying is...
Well, there's 1 in 4 of you out there, Mike.
He's only got 3 friends.
You don't see pensioners driving around in Rolls-Royces and going on a holiday to the south of France. The millionaire status...
I mean, you do,
is the £50,000. It's the £50,000 house they bought in the 1950s, which is now worth £1.5 million.
Fair comment.
But that cannot pay their heating bill.
And in fact, actually, it's harder to heat because it's big.
It's harder to heat because it's bigger. It's not a very good house, so it's got, wooden frames for windows, which...
Well, Mike, I'm sorry to say this, but why not sell it in that case?
Because they're worried about their old age. As we're all getting older, you're going to need that money because the next thing we're expecting is the removal of the care cap of 86,000, isn't it? So old people are going to need every penny they've got for their old age.
Now, hang on, is that I thought that had gone... I can't remember where we are with the 86,000, whether they've got that in or not.
No, I'm not sure
I think Labour... I don't think anyone dares to put it in. because it could be so expensive.
Yes, but this wasn't in the manifesto. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
But there are lots of policies that aren't stated specifically in a manifesto.
Yeah.
It's not a contract. We know that. And the fact is, you know, Labour have got to start being innovative when it talks about how we're going to rebuild ourselves as an economy.
Yeah.
And the reality is we can no longer rely on the disabled. We can no longer rely on the vulnerable. We can no longer rely on those who are claiming sickness benefit because the Conservatives have quite frankly stripped them bare. So where else are we going to go in terms of...
Your lack of compassion. Your lack of compassion for old people. When you go shopping...
lack of compassion for people who are millionaires.
They're not millionaires. This is a load of nonsense. We've just explained. It's the house that's worth £1 million. They haven't got any money. I mean, I go shopping in supermarkets like you do, and you see these old ladies and these old men looking at the price of everything before they put it in their basket because they don't know if they can afford it. I think it's an absolute...
Let's go to Angie in Essex. Angie, who do you agree with here?
Good morning, Bill. I totally agree with Mike. This what they've done is totally out of order, I think. Like, you know, even if, like, the poor pensioners that are able to get the pension credit, it's still not a lot of money. It's still not a lot of money. They can't afford to live on that money. And, you know, most of these pensioners have paid in all their lives. And to be treated like this, and as for Labour saying that they didn't realise there was such a black hole, what the Conservatives left behind, I don't believe that for 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, we know we're in debt. Yeah.
What are the pensioners going to do?
Bless you, Angie. Thank you. Patricia in Surrey, what do you think of this?
Oh, good morning. I am so incensed by this because the thing is, we can't help. We're all going to get old. They're going to get old as well. The thing is, we're state pensioners. That's all. When my husband gets a post office pension, we don't get pension credit. We shop at cheaper shops. But what worries me is the people that don't get pension credit and they can't afford not to get their winter fuel allowance. They can't afford to either go. They can either have heating or food. Yeah.
I think we've clocked. Thank you, Patricia. This £300 is very, very valuable to a lot of people. Thank you, David in Middlesbrough. Do you agree with Paula or with Mike?
Mike, the situation, as I say, is that it's a double jeopardy because from next April, on top of the £300, we are losing proportion of our pension from taxation.
Well, that's because the pension's going up, though, right? I mean, that's the state pension's going up.
Yes, but
fiscal drag, isn't it?
Be paying tax on?
Yeah,
paying tax on our state pension.
Yeah, there's a madness here, Paula, isn't it? Because the Tories said we will stop the state pension being taxed. But I can't even get my head around it, where you give pensioners a rise in the state pension, and because the tax thresholds are frozen, as Mike says, this thing called fiscal drag, people end up literally given with one hand and taken away with the other.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
It seems odd.
And that is something that was happening under the Conservative government. And, you know...
Well, but they did have a pledge at the election that you will not be taxed on your state pension.
That's right.
The reality is, and I totally accept what Patricia says and totally accepting what David's saying, there is that, we spoke about, that grey area of people who are not receiving pension credits but are still going to struggle, because we've seen that £300 that could be put towards that 10% increase that we're going to see in the fuel prices that go up come October. And what I want to see, actually, is the Labour government saying we can't be as arbitrary as just having that single cut-off in relation to pension credits. We are going to have to be smarter about how we do address that grey area. Totally accept that.